Hi, I'm Marinelle Newton at Church Street Wine Cellars. I'm here with Morgan Peterson, the Bedrock Wine Company. Hi, Morgan.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm good. So you grew up in the wine business.
I did. I grew up in the wine industry. My father, Joel Peterson, founded Ravenswood Winery back in 1976. So, you know, starting when I was knee-high to a grasshopper, I was jumping around the barrels and doing that stuff. And he had me making wine when I was 5 years old, so I started making Pinot Noir then with some fruit the San Giacomo family gave me, the Sonoma Carneros. And then, yeah, it sort of went from there. I made that Pinot until I was 21 years old. And
oh my goodness.
Until at which point it just got boring and I went to college. And now I've come back and I've started Bedrock Wine Company.
Do you have any particular favorite memories with your dad at the winery?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I remember probably the most exciting time of year is harvest, of course, since you can sense the excitement and the sleep deprivation as well. But you know, everything's sort of coming in, the hours are long, and there's always sort of the smell of fermentation. And my dad's winery, Ravenswood, when I was growing up, was still tiny, and it was in the back of an artisan woodworking place. They actually made artisan toilet seats. And it was this tiny little place. It was probably 1,500 square feet, and my dad would, you know, at 5 o'clock in the morning before going off to work at the lab in bacteriology, he would come and do punch down, and then late at night he would go and do punch down. And my mom was in nursing school at the time, so I was with my dad almost exclusively, and so I remember going and doing night punch downs with him, and it just always just smelling so good, and you know, getting to try to punch down the cap myself, although it was very hard. And I mean, even when I was a little baby, there's pictures of me on his back doing punch down, which is, I mean, it's really, really laborious stuff. So it was, so I have very fond memories of that. I have very fond memories of visiting vineyards as well. He really had some of the great old vineyards and some really great old personalities that came with them. So, you know, we would go on these routes and see Peterson Vineyard and the Teldeskis, which are this great Italian family up in Dry Creek, and we would always eat incredibly well and drink too well and all that type of stuff. And it was a really no, it was really lovely and a very idyllic childhood in many cases.
It sounds like it. So, if you could name like one of the greatest lessons you've learned from your dad that you bring to the way you make wine now, if you could pick one or two things that you think that you learned from him that influences you now?
Well, I think it's, you know, my dad is such an influence on me, and he's, you know, he's my best friend, and we're very, very close, and he's very closely involved with Bedrock as well, so it's hard to single out just one. I guess the one thing that I would say was just his just sheer passion for it. I mean, he absolutely adores old vines, he adores history, and it's clearly that enthusiasm and that love of the vines and of the people that come with him that really made me want to go into the industry. In terms of just winemaking, I would say Bedrock's focus on preponderantly old vines is one thing, and then also I think what my dad calls the 3 sins of Zinfandel, which is to avoid too much oak, too much alcohol, and residual sugar. And I think that those are, you know, those are probably the 2 most fundamental things that affect the winemaking at Bedrock.
So that the love of old vines, is that what influenced the label?
Yes, absolutely. And also I sort of, the label, you'll notice there's a little raven on it, which is a little homage to the ravens at Ravenswood. But the old vine, but also there's a certain sort of, that vine kind of looks like it's dancing too, and I think that it's sort of having, you know, it's old, it's gnarled, but at the same time it's got some movement in it at the same time. And, you know, that's sort of how I hope that these wines are in many ways.
So I read you recently passed the Master of Wine exam.
Yeah, I passed the written part and the tasting part. I'm just finishing the dissertation. So once I get that in and I pass, then I get to put the MW next to my name. Yeah.
So what's a preparation like for something like that?
Oh God, lots of prayer. The preparation was actually really great. So it actually dovetailed really nicely with when I decided to leave graduate school and come back and work on starting Bedrock. I started doing the Master of Wine, and I went and I worked in Australia, and I worked in, at Chateau Riche in France, and all of that really dovetailed nicely with learning the enology and viticulture that's necessary to pass the MW. It's a British degree, so it demands, it's very international in scope. It's not, it really does a great job of disrupting sort of the parochial mindset I think you sometimes get if you're just making wine in one spot all the time. It also forces you to taste incredibly internationally. You have to know what Blaufränkisch or the Burgenland tastes like, or or any number of other things out there. So it involved a huge amount of tasting. The exam is 4 days long. You taste blind in the morning, 12 wines each day in double blind conditions. So you have to identify them, generally down to grape varietal, method of production, that type of thing. And then you have to write on enology and viticulture in the afternoon. So it's a really good way to basically give me the the ultimate crunch course and how to run. And also it includes the business of wine. So it was really great for. It's completely and totally applicable to starting Bedrock. So. Yeah.
So tell me what your philosophy is about winemaking.
Yeah, I can. Well, I mean, my general philosophy is I really feel like there's not a lot that I, as a human being, do except choose the vineyard, choose when to pick, choose the oak, racking, and bottling. I mean, that's really all that a winemaker does if you're working with really great fruit. Typically, the best sites, require the least amount of effort. When I was working in Australia at a big place, there's all sorts of stuff we had to do to the wine to make it palatable. But when you're working with just beautiful vineyards like I do, there's not a lot you have to do. So the basic thing is I pick typically at relatively old school levels of ripeness, and when I say that I mean 14.5% potential alcohol, hopefully, for Zinfandel rather than some of the bigger things. Native yeast fermentations always for me. Native malolactics, manual punch down, manual basket pressing. No racking. If there is any racking, it's done by sort of what I call poor man's gravity flow. It's a bulldog pump, so it's displacement with gas. So just really, as gentle of a hand as I can. And I really like that Bedrock is a one-man show. I do everything, and so it's like I have absolute control of quality. And fortunately, I have absolutely nobody to blame but myself when something goes wrong. But that's the way that I prefer it.
So we have two wines.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell us about the Sherman and Hooker's Shebang?
I certainly will. The Sherman and Hooker Shebang is my little fun jug wine. It's a 1 liter wine. It's named after the two generals that founded my vineyard in 1854, General William Tecumseh Sherman and Joseph Hooker. It's generally, it's a non-vintage, non-varietal blend, which gives me the ultimate flexibility in blending it. It includes some of my wines that don't make the top cut. I'm a very small winery, so there's no place to put the barrel or two from each lot that I don't think fits into the blend. So I put it into there, and then I mix it and blend it with similar wines from other very small producers, other really quality-conscious producers that are out there. So it's just supposed to be a really honest expression of California wine that's not pretentious, that's fairly priced, and doesn't come with all the stuff that comes in a lot of cheap wine, like oak chips, oak extract, mega red, concentrate, all that stuff. It's just honest, well-made wine. It's generally a mixture of Syrah, Zinfandel, Sangiovese, Cabernet, and even a little bit of Marsanne, Roussanne, and Viognier in this case. It's just supposed to be just an approachable, everyday drinking wine.
One question that my customers ask me all the time when they buy a bottle of wine is, what food do I have with this wine?
Right.
What is some of the best food pairings you've had with the Shebang?
Well, I make it to be really, really approachable. So in some cases, the best food pairing is nothing, and just having it, out at a picnic or a concert. At the same time, it's Syrah and Zinfandel driven. It's got good fruit. It's got good spice. So it typically bakes. I mean, meat dishes, or if you're, a vegetarian like my father is, and I am. When I am being good, things that really sort of richer bean-based dishes, protein-heavy dishes, that type of thing. So.
And we also have one of your heirloom wines,
yes,
from Lorenzo's Lorenzo's Heirloom Dry Creek Valley.
Yes, Lorenzo's Heirloom. So the heirloom wines are my attempt to make the wines that California would have made if it weren't for Prohibition, in my opinion. These are from vines that are incredibly old. In this case, these are 110-year-old vines, dry farmed on the Dry Creek bench. And although based on Zinfandel, which is really truly California's grape, it also includes a lot of the other stuff that's interplanted out in the vineyard and was interplanted out there. Most of the, in fact, all of the ancient vineyards I've seen are field ones. They're typically, they can be anywhere between 70 to 95% Zinfandel, and there's always other stuff out there. So this, I bring into focus more of the Carignan, which sort of balances out the Zin, brings it spice, brings it brightness, and the Petit Syrah, which brings it color and tannin, and I co-ferment all of these. And in a year like 2008, which was quite warm in California, whereas if I just was making this as Zinfandel, the fruit got very, very ripe. I would have had to water back if I had any hope of completing the fermentation to dryness, and even if I did, it would be 17% alcohol, and not a wine I really would want to drink. But by co-fermenting the Carignan and Petit Syrah, which are slightly slower ripeners, I didn't have to do it, and the end wine, I think, is much more balanced and just a much more complete wine, and I would say it tastes absolutely like California, what California wine should taste like, but it also I think is a more complete wine when it's taken in context with the wines from the rest of the world.
And
so,
what would you have with this in terms of a meal?
Well, it's Zin, so it's Zin based. It's got all that spice. It's got that bigness.
Right.
On this trip in Vermont, I've actually had some of the best Latin and Mexican food that I've had in a long time, and that's coming from a person who eats at taco stands constantly, and it's and the wines are paired really, really nicely with that. They do well with spice, with chipotle spice, with adobo-based spices, and things that have, like we had these rabbit enchiladas that were just absolutely, braised rabbit enchiladas that were amazing. Goes really well with duck. But I think that these wines are very, very versatile in terms of what they can go with, just because they've got enough acidity and enough brightness that they can, that they complement quite a few things. I wouldn't have it with salad, but with other things, a number of other things go with it.
So you're not new to the wine business because you've been making wine since you were your child, but you're quite young.
Yes.
So when all is said and done, one last question.
Yeah.
How would you like to be remembered in the wine world?
Oh, well, I mean, it's funny, my dad was relating something to me the other day where, we were actually visiting Bordeaux last year, and he sort of had this thought. He's like, well, I really have this sort of dream of being sort of an old man and coming through the cellar and tasting out of tank and being like, yep, this is good, this is good. I made some really, really good wines in my day. I'm really proud to pass it on. And that's pretty much all I can hope for. I mean, I make wines because it's intellectually fascinating to me, and I love the people, and I love the culture around wine, and I love working with these beautiful old vineyards in California, which really are absolutely unique treasures. But at the same time, it's sort of like I make the wines for people's enjoyment. So if they're enjoying the wines, that typically means that I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and that's really all I can ask for. It's basic pleasure principles. So it's that's really all I could hope for. So, and if I can save a few of these really, really old vineyards along the way, and have people really understand them more, then I feel like I'd be doing a pretty good job.
I get that you have a real love for history as well.
I do.
You do.
Yeah. So.
Morgan, thank you for coming to Vermont and to Church Street Wine Cellars. I hope you come back often.
It's my pleasure. As I say, Vermonters remind me of Northern Californians, but they're way more hardcore. So it's I feel like I'm of my kind here, accepting a bit of awe. So it's great. So
I think we're done.
Cool.